Hi guys. So we're gonna start the topics regarding the OOPS or object oriented programming structure. That is the introduction to OOPS. Okay. So we are in the middle of the Java playlist. I already have uploaded the few videos on the Java. So if you haven't watched the previous videos, so I request you to go and watch the previous videos. Okay. After that, you will come able to understand the OOPS programming structure. Okay. So in this lecture, I'll tell you about the introduction to the OOPS, what exactly OOPS stands for. Okay. But before understanding the OOPS or object-oriented programming structure, let us understand which was the first object-oriented programming language. Okay. So first, the programming language was Simula. Okay, so Simula is considered as the first object-oriented programming language, and the programming structure where everything is represented as an object is known as the truly object-oriented programming language. Okay, we call a language a truly object-oriented programming language if it is totally based on the classes and the object. I'll tell you about what is the classes, what is all about the object. I'll tell you everything about that. Okay, but let us understand, if we are considering everything in objects, if we are considering every entities in the world as an object, then we can connect easily with our programming structure. That's why in OOPS programming structure we take everything as a classes and the object for better understanding and better cope up with the programming structure. Understood? So small talk is considered as the first programming structure. Okay, small talk is considered as the first truly object programming structure. It means small talk is totally based on the classes and the object. Okay, and apart from small talk and Simula, other programming structure which is based on the object oriented programming structure is Java, C has, PHP, Python, C++, and etc. So these are the object oriented programming languages. Okay, the main purpose of object-oriented programming language or structure is to deal with the real-world entity. Here, the entity stands for the object. Okay, so we deal with real-time entity, or you can say the object, using these programming languages. Understood? And the OOP stands for the object-oriented programming structure. But one of the major question is why we follow the OOPS-oriented programming structure. Why there is a need of OOPS? Okay, so let us understand the need for OOPS. Okay, now previously we are following procedural oriented languages. Okay, so procedural oriented languages, for example, C is procedural oriented programming languages. In that we follow the top down approach. Okay, follow the top down approach. Okay, so let us understand the differences between the procedural programming languages and today that is the project object oriented programming languages, that is the Java. So in the procedural programming languages, we usually solve any of the program by dividing into the small parts, and that small parts we call it as a function. We usually take some of the small functions and together we consider as a one program. Understood? But in the object oriented programming languages, we take everything as a object. Okay, so with the help of objects and classes we usually solve any problem statement. Understood? So here in that we divide into the small parts, and that small parts is called object. Okay, so procedural programming language follow the top down approach, while the object oriented programming follows the bottom down approach. Okay, now SS specifier. SS specifier is what? Public, protected, private, and default. These are the SS modifier. What is the meaning of SS modifier? Basically, with the help of it, we can restrict the access over the packages. For example, if we declare any packages as public, it means it will be accessible in all the classes in our application. If we are considering as a protected, it means it is accessible within the package in which the it is defined. Okay, and private which is accessible only within the class and which is in which it is defined. And default is accessible within the same class and the same packages within which it class is defined. Understood? So it means procedural programming language follow the top down approach, while the object oriented programming language follow the bottom down approach. There is a no SS specifier. It means there is a no use of any public, protected, default, and protected SS specifier in the procedural type language. But we provide some restriction for the accessibility by providing a private, public, protected as a specifier. Okay, so this is the main use of the object oriented programming structure. Now in procedural programming, overloading is not possible. Okay, I'll tell you about what is overloading. While in the object oriented programming language, overloading is possible in object oriented programming language. I'll tell you about the overloading and overriding in the constructor lecture. Okay, now code reusability is absent in procedural programming. We cannot reuse the code while we follow the programming structure, procedural programming structure. While the code reusability is present in the object oriented programming language, if we create one object in a programming structure, then we can use that object in the following application also, in the following programs also. Okay, so that is the main use of using the object oriented programming language over the procedural programming language. Okay, now in procedural programming language, the function is more important than data, but in the object oriented programming language, we are more concerned about the data rather than the functions. Okay, so data is more important in object oriented programming language as compared to the procedural. Okay, some example of the procedural programming language are C, Fortran, Pascal, Basics, and etc. These are the example of procedural programming language, while the object oriented programming language C++, Java, Python, and H. Okay, so after differentiating between the procedural programming language and the object oriented programming language, we come to know that object oriented programming language is much faster and easier as compared to the procedural programming language. Okay, because in object oriented programming language, we find objects and the classes, and it is very easy to deal with the objects and the classes while doing any programming and coding part. Okay, and second, then we have some ss modifier also, that it means we can restrict the users by providing classes as a private, public, and protected. Okay, so this is one of the most important feature, and overloading is possible. Okay, we can also overload the constructor, we can also overload the function in case of the object oriented programming language. Okay, and next is code reusability is one of the major factor. For that we use the object oriented programming language. Okay, so that is the more important, that we have to study the object oriented programming structure. Okay, and Java is one of the object oriented programming languages. Okay, now let us understand the classes and the object. So I have recently told you that we in object oriented programming language we usually deal with the classes and the object. So it is very important to define the what the classes exactly is. Okay, so we can say that class is a group of objects which have common properties. Obviously, if we say class 9, it means all the students which are present in that class are in a class 9. Understood? So for example, if I say group of flowers, so it means we are collectively calling a group of flowers. Okay, so class is a what? Class is a group of object. If I say animal class, it means in that class all animals are present, so we together we call it as a what? Class. Understood? So it is also what? It is also a blueprint from which object are created. Why? Because why blueprint? Because if we say animal as a class, so it means we find that there are no humans in that class. Obviously, if it is a blueprint of the animal, obviously in that class only animal will be present, not the humans. Understood? So it is defined as the blueprint from which the class objects are created. And secondly, it also defines the properties of that class. For example, animal class, it means it has four legs, which are some of the resembling properties which we have. Okay, so it defines the characteristics of that class. Okay, and it defines the property of that class. It is a logical entity and it cannot be a physical. Okay, so we have to remember the definition for the classes is class is a group of objects which have the common properties. Okay, obviously all the things that we are put in a particular class must have common property, must share the common property, and it is also a blueprint. Okay, so we usually find two types of classes in the Java. First is predefined classes. It means whose meaning is already defined in the Java packages. For example, scanner is a class which is already defined in the Java package. Console is a class, system is a class, string is a class. So these are the some of the classes whose meaning is already defined in the Java packages. That's why we call it as a predefined. And second is the user defined, that we create as a programmer. The class which is created by the programmer is called the user defined. For example, if we are creating a program in which we have to need a class of student, so we call it as a student as a class. If we need of any other classes like employee, so we can create according to our need. Okay, so inside it we can use the many functions, many methods, many fields, and etc. So this is a syntax for writing any of the class. Now let us understand what is object. Object is what? Object is an entity that has a state and behavior. Behavior here stands for the properties, that is the characteristics every object poses. For example, chair, bike, marker, pen, table. So these are the real world entity that we take it as an object, which has some of the specific property, which has some of the specific characteristics. Okay, it can be physical, it can be logical. For example, chair is a physical, market is a physical thing. Okay, so it can be physical and it can be logical also. We can also create the logical. For example, banking system is not a real entity, but we can take it as an object also, because it is a logically enabled. Okay, so the example for the intangible object, or you can say the logical object, is known as the banking system, ATM system. So these are the what logical things that we take it as an object for our programming structure. Okay, now one very important thing, once the object is created, it takes up the space like other variable in the memory. So we have understood in the variable section that all the variable takes some amount of memory. Okay, and take some amount of space also. Like that, whenever we create any type of object, whether it is a physical object or whether it is a logical object, so once the object is created, it takes up some space like other variable in the memory. Okay, so it means object takes the space and the memory. We have to remember this statement. Understood? Now, what the object has three character. So object has three character. First, the state represents the value of an object, what the value we are taking against any particular object. So that is the state. Second is behavior represents the functionality. Okay, if for example, if we are taking the logical entity as a banking system, so in the banking system, the behavior of that banking system is what? Deposit, withdraw. So these are the functionality that we are taking against that particular object, that is the banking system. Okay, so whenever we declare any objects, we declare three things. We declare the state, we declare the behavior, we declare the identity. Identity is the third part, that is the an object identity is typically implemented via unique ID. The value of ID is not visible to the external user. However, it is used internally by the JVM to identify each object uniquely. Whenever you define any object in the JVM takes it as a value of one ID, and it is used internally. Okay, and it is not externally visible to the user. Okay, whenever we create, JVM automatically create one ID for a particular object. Okay, so that is why it has a three characteristics: state, behavior, and the identity. Understood? So this is all about the object and the classes. Now, the creation and initialization. How can we create a object, and how can we initialize the object? The for syntax for the creation and the initialization of a particular object, first of all, we have to write a class name. Understood? Because we are creating the object of a particular class, so that we have to write the class name. No, so here we write the name of the class. Then the object name, we have to write any one name of the object. Then new. New is a keyword. In the variable section, I have told you that new is a keyword. And remember, my dear friend, new keyword is used for the initialization of any object. Understood? So new, without new keyword, we cannot create any object. We cannot initialize any particular object. After the new, we have to put constructor. I'll tell you about the constructor in the future lectures. Okay, till now understand. Constructor is a method, is a special type of method whose name is same as that of the class name. Okay. Okay, if we are creating a object name of a whatever a class, then we have to put that class name as a constructor. So this method is same as that of this class name. Understood? So that is why it is a constructor. If we put any another method, so that method we cannot consider as a constructor. Constructor is just defined as this method which has the same name as that of the class name. Understood? So this is a dynamic memory allocation. So with the help of dynamic memory allocation, we are just creating the object and initializing the object of a particular class. Understood, guys? Okay. So in this way, we can define the classes, we can define the objects. So in this lecture, I have told you about what is object-oriented programming structure, why there is a need of object-oriented programming structure. We have seen differences between the procedural programming structure and the object-oriented programming structure, and we have seen what are the differences between the classes and the object. How can we define the classes in a memory? How can we define the object? What are the syntax of all those? So we have seen. In the next lecture, I'll tell you about how can we write a particular program by following the object oriented programming structure. In that program, I'll tell you about what are the classes, how can we define a particular classes in a particular program, how can we define a particular object in a particular program. I'll tell you about that. It means next videos are all are practical about this theory purpose. Okay, so till then, thank you and keep studying.